Let him who hath understanding reckon the number of the beast, for it is a human number. Its number is 666.
The blonde news reporter, he was standing in the street with his shirt off, and his chest hairs, there was 3 hairs on his chest, and they were all in the form of 6s.
666 everywhere. Everywhere.
Well, that was weird. With 3 exclamation points.
Let us consider the problem of evil. And incidentally, it's a problem for everybody. It's not just the biblical problem of evil. It's everybody's problem of evil, including the atheists. Now, generally, the objection to the problem of evil, which is supposed to be a defeater, is words to the effect of, if God is, then God is omnipotent and omnibenevolent. So in other words, if there is a God, then surely that God would be all-powerful and all-loving. Now, granting the existence of evil, it is proposed that if God was omnipotent, he would stop all evil or prevent it. And if God was omnibenevolent, he would want to stop it and prevent it. Since evil exists, then either God is not omnipotent or is not omnibenevolent. And so therefore, God is not. Or, if there is a God, but God is not omnipotent and omnibenevolent, then why refer to such a being as God, right? So, the first thing to note is that this is actually a false dichotomy. It's a false choice between 2 options. If God is omnipotent and omnibenevolent, he would seek to prevent evil. But evil exists, so either God is omnipotent but not omnibenevolent, so that he can stop evil, but he chooses not to because he's not all-loving, or God is omnibenevolent but not omnipotent, so that he is all-loving and wants to prevent evil, but cannot do so. So that's a classic false dichotomy. And false dichotomies are actually something that is not rare to encounter. I mean, it was used on Jesus, for example, when he was asked about paying taxes. So if he said yes, then he would be accused of siding with Rome. If he said no, then he could be turned into Rome as a person encouraging some sort of rebellion. So instead, he found the third way. Not one of the 2 options of the false dichotomy, but the third way, which was he has to see a denarius, and whose image is on it? Caesar's. Okay, then, pay to Caesar what is Caesar's, and pay to God what is God's. Or there's the classic false dichotomy. Have you stopped beating your wife? Okay, so if you say yes, that means you used to. And if you say no, well, then you still are. Of course, why not answer with the third way? I never have, and I do not, and I never will. You see, there's no logical imperative that forces you to fall for a false dichotomy whereby you must answer with one of the 2 options. So just come up with a third way. And in the case of the problem of evil, there does seem to be a third way. And I think I'll explain it in the way of an anecdote, okay? When my youngest boy was born, I know I'm weird, but when I was actually in the nursery, when he was just a few minutes old, I was looking at him laying there, completely helpless, a newborn babe, and I was thinking about the problem of evil. Well, the nurse came up to jam a needle into his foot, a syringe, in order to check his blood sugar. And as she did so, I stared right into his face, and his face turned bright red, and he grimaced and he let out a cry, a yell of pain. So I thought to myself, well, for all intents and purposes, I'm his omnipotent father. I mean, I could have stopped her. I could have stopped her legally and physically. But I didn't. Why? Why did I allow this evil? Why did I allow this pain and suffering? I mean, am I not omnibenevolent as his father? Well, of course. So why did I just sit there literally and do nothing? Well, that's because I knew better. I knew better. In other words, I had a reason. I had a reason for allowing that pain and suffering to take place while I sat there and did nothing. And in fact, it's not that I did nothing. I spoke to him comforting words. I caressed him. But, of course, what's that in comparison to being a newborn and having a sharp piece of metal stuck into you? So in other words, I was there. I was comforting him. I was responding. I was active. But for all I know, he was completely unaware of it. And even his awareness of me would not have really changed the fact of the pain and suffering. So now that is the third way, which is that if God has a reason for allowing evil, pain and suffering, then that does away with the problem of evil. And incidentally, it's not that if he has a reason with which we agree, or even a reason of which we are aware. Because it's just whether he has a reason that we might not even be able to quantify or qualify in any way whatsoever, just as my son did. He was not aware of my reasons. He could not have understood my reasons. All he knew was the pain and suffering. So that's the scenario. He's experiencing pain and suffering, an evil, and I could have done something to prevent it, but I didn't. And it's because I knew better. I had a reason. So now, I tried an experiment when he was, I think he was 1.5. I explained this whole scenario to him. And he just sort of wiggled and walked away. He still has no a way to understand the whole situation. The medical procedure. The fact that I was concerned for his health and all of this. And I intend to continue this experiment, and every few years, maybe wait till he's a teenager where he can actually understand it, and I'll explain it to him. But I have a feeling that when I do so, his reaction will be something like, "What? What are you talking? Why are you even bringing this up? You know, you're explaining to me why you allowed a nurse to poke me in the foot when I was a newborn? What, like, you know, I mean, it'll seem utterly irrelevant to him." See, that's the point. And I have a feeling that for those who end up in heaven, who think ahead of time, like right now, that we're going to demand an explanation for suffering and evil, I think it'll just seem utterly irrelevant at that point. Well, that might be so, but that's at that point. What about the here and now? There's real evil, there's real pain, there's real suffering. You see, the Judeo-Christian worldview theology affirms the existence of actual evil. And not only that, it provides a premise upon which to condemn evil. Now let's get to the atheist problem of evil. And incidentally, don't worry about it when atheists complain that God does nothing about evil. Because when they find out what he not only is doing, but particularly what he will eventually do, they'll also complain about that. So, let's say that you contemplate the problem of evil and you conclude that God does not exist. Well, you look around, then you will surely note that there's still evil. I mean, you haven't done away with evil. And now on top of it, you don't even have God to blame for it anymore. But of course, one atheist's reply to the problem of evil would be to ask, what evil? Right? What is it that we're calling evil? I mean, what exactly? A lion eating a deer? A tsunami wiping out a village? One human being murdering another one? What exactly is evil? What we actually find is that the problem of evil is one of the very best reasons for rejecting atheism. And that's because atheism not only does nothing about evil, but it makes it even worse. Now, let's take a step back, because some will say, well, atheism, it's not up to atheism to do anything about evil, because atheism, it's a mere concept. It's just an idea. It's an abstract. Well, that is just the point. Atheism is not a being. It has no volition. It has no potency whatsoever. Exactly. Atheism does nothing about the problem of evil. So why appeal to it when confronted with the problem of evil? So now, let's take a generalized view of atheism and relate it to Darwin's theory of evolution. Because there are many atheists who compile the two. One leads to the other in one way or another. So now, what are we talking about within the atheist evolutionary worldview, or worldviews, or concepts, when we refer to evil? You see, there are atheists such as Sam Harris and Michael Roos who have made statements to the effect of that rape played a beneficial role in human evolution. And then Richard Dawkins was asked if that rape is viewed nowadays as immoral, if it's as arbitrary as the fact that we evolved to have 5 fingers instead of 6, and he replied in the affirmative. I mean, it's totally arbitrary. In this particular zeitgeist, rape is immoral. You might want to ask a rapist, though. They would probably disagree, but as a whole. But now, what happens when zeitgeist turns to poltergeist? Let's imagine a place like Haiti that was devastated by earthquakes, and so many people died. So now their human population level was depleted. Now, can rape make an evolutionary and a moral comeback in Haiti? I mean, why not? Men need to spread their seed. Richard Dawkins says that's our only true reason for existing, is propagating our DNA, our genes. Why couldn't it make a moral and evolutionary comeback? I mean, it is beneficial for increasing population size, right? And the point is that as we consider all of history from an atheist evolutionary point of view, everything that has ever happened anywhere is for the benefit of evolution, right? Everything. Because for some unknown reason, nature seeks survival and betterment. And so everything that has ever happened goes towards survival and betterment. All right? So murder, rape, pedophilia, tsunamis, volcanoes, all kinds of natural disasters and man-made disasters and atrocities. Ultimately, they all benefit us. They're all beneficial. So, on that view, evil, pain, and suffering is beneficial. It's a good thing. Not only that, but on that view, the evildoer gets to enjoy themselves, while the person to whom they perform the evil act gets to suffer, sometimes for decades, sometimes for a lifetime. But the evildoer enjoys their evil deeds, benefits from them, and hey, if they're not caught by the judicial systems of this world, they literally get away with it. That's what atheism guarantees you. Evildoers literally get away with it. They enjoy their evil actions and nothing. There's no judgment, no condemnation in an ultimate transcendent sense. None. So it makes evil even worse. Another issue is, yes, atheists have basically built their movement upon condemning evil, right? The evil God of the Bible. I mean, let's face it, atheism is primarily an anti-Christian support group. Let's not get confused about that. But upon what premise do they condemn, well, anything at all? Now, someone may say that they have personally chosen to dislike and therefore condemn a certain action, but that's a personal preference. And upon what is that premised? Well, a personal preference, and that is based upon another personal preference. And so we end up with a bottomless pit of personal preferences. And some may say, well, life is better than death, pleasure is preferable over pain, etc. But this too is an assertion. It's just a mere assertion based upon what premise? Because I could very well argue, well, yeah, maybe my own personal life is to be preferred over my personal death. But hey, if you got something I want, then why don't I just prefer your death so I can get what you have? Right? I mean, I may enjoy pleasure over pain, but if inflicting pain upon you gets me what I want, then why not? You see, these are all their assertions, and we're so used to just making those assertions that we don't stop to think about upon what premise are we making them. We just automatically spout them out. So sure, the benefit of myself or my family or my little clan or tribe or even nation is preferable to me. But when I need goods, when I need resources, hey, why not battle and let's see who survives as the fittest, right? Now, when we say something like causing harm to others is wrong, of course that's another assertion. Pleasure is to be preferred over pain. Let's keep in mind what we're talking about here on an evolutionary atheistic point of view. We are merely talking about the interpretation of biochemical reactions occurring within the gray matter of a bioorganism that is sitting atop a spinning rock in the universe's backwaters. That is what we're talking about. Mere interpretations of biochemical reactions. We interpret one as pleasurable, we interpret the other as painful, and then we demand to build an ethical system upon them. And that's quite a stretch. So we find that the Judeo-Christian worldview, theology, and the atheist worldviews all must deal with the problem of evil. One affirms the reality of evil and does something about it. One can affirm or deny the problem of evil or the existence thereof, and does nothing about it except to complain as a gut reaction without a premise. So, at the very least, the Judeo-Christian worldview theology offers you hope, and with God as a philosophically necessary being, makes it more likely that there's an ultimate resolution to this, because such a being would have the ability to redeem evil. Whereas atheism, the negation of any such worldview theology, offers nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing. No explanation for yesterday, no hope for today, and no reason for tomorrow. The problem of evil is the very best reason for rejecting atheism. Now, let's consider the fact that there is more than one problem of evil, or rather, there are different levels to it. Okay? So there's like a philosophical or logical or theological level of the problem of evil. But there's also an incredibly important level, which is the emotional level. And so you have atheists such as Sam Harris who love to come before an audience and ask them to think about a little girl who is tortured and raped. Okay? So what he's doing there is he's building an emotional bond with his audience. And we as human beings, we naturally build those bonds with somebody who causes us to feel an emotion. It's just natural. So he's building that relationship with his audience by getting them emotively, by getting them to sense emotions. And surely many of them can empathetically relate to such suffering, having gone through it themselves. So now imagine being the speaker who has to respond to Sam Harris, and you spout off some logically accurate, some philosophically right-on statement about the problem of evil, having a resolution, and just the way we've been going through. You need to understand how dry as dust that will come across as being, because the audience is actually sensing a tangible emotion, and all you're throwing at them is an abstract concept. Think about that. A real, tangible, a felt emotion versus a mere abstract concept. And that's very important to keep in mind, because that's what you're up against. So for instance, when someone's in the midst of suffering, you don't throw out logic, you don't throw philosophy at them. You empathize with them, you sympathize with them, you love them, you're patient, and maybe just be quiet. There's a time and a place for that. And when someone is confronting pain and suffering, it may not be the time to wax poetic about it. In fact, I remember distinctly when I was training in martial arts, one of the students came in very distraught. And the reply of my teacher, who was a Buddhist, was to say, well, if the Buddha said, if you cease from desire, then you'll cease from suffering. Wow, that's deep, man. Well, but the issue is she actually asked a logical question. Well, how do I do that? How do I go about ceasing from desire? And the teacher said, well, I don't know, I haven't reached that level myself yet. Okay? So, hey, here's a quaint reply, you suffering person, you. Okay, but how is it in the real world? How do I go about acquiring this release of suffering? I don't know. I guess just give it a shot and keep trying. And by the way, what do you do with your desire to rid yourself of desire? And so, thank God I had the occasion to call her aside and have a little conversation with her about Jesus. So that's very important to keep in mind, to know when you're up against emotion, because an abstract black and white dry as dust concept is no match for a real tangibly felt emotion, and a lot of speakers take advantage of that. So you need to deal with a person on various levels.